The availability of technology and online platforms to share original content has enabled the average person to create films and games rivaling that of major studio productions. The internet has a lot more flexibility and freedom to create what they want compared to studios that have to stick to the same old formula for pulling in audiences. It's no surprise that online users have developed an interest in the internet's unique take on horror and storytelling, but unfortunately, we're starting to see this genre of internet horror becoming a bit cliche and formulaic. This was partially on accident, as so many ideas have just already been done to death, but we also have some creators exploiting the popularity of this content for money or fame with little concern for what they could do differently. I mean, if it gets clicks anyway, then there's no incentive to change the formula, but I know there are fans and creators alike who want to see something exciting again. I mean, when we were first drawn to these ARGs and internet horror and analog horror, it was because of how new and fresh it was, so I don't want to see the charm of that disappear. I've scrolled through the videos of many upcoming projects from new creators, and I see how ambitious they are, so I'd like to give my advice to any new or even existing creators that want the feedback. Keep in mind, this is just my personal opinion, and it's not like I'm an expert on any of this. I'll be lumping in a lot of internet-based horror together, though I'm primarily focusing on analog horror. So firstly, I want to ask you, why are you making this? This was something Nightmine has already stated in his own How to Make a Web Series playlist, which I'd highly recommend, but it's a very important question. If you want to do this because it looks like an easy ticket to money or 5 seconds of fame, then you can go down that route and copy all of Poppy Playtime or Five Nights at Freddy's, but that's not really what I'm seeking to advise. Often, doing what is popular is the quickest way to succeed, but you usually need some sort of following already. If you just hopped online with no followers or no community you're a part of, and you just go straight to making random clickbait, I mean, even if you have a small loyal following, there's still no guarantee you'll get attention. YouTube and other website algorithms don't really reward original content. So if it's money and views you want, then get ready to make a lot of backrooms, Poppy Playtime, FNF, Roblox crossovers, because that's how you appeal to the lowest common denominator. However, if you want this because you are passionate about your craft and you want to put something good out there, then I want to support that. Just know that none of this is quick or easy, so you really do need to care about what you're investing in, and don't get too upset if no one sees right away. Not all of us are getting a game theory video. Now that you know you want to do this, I want you to recognize your limitations. We don't all have a $500 camera, studio quality editing software, and infinite money to spend on stock sounds and footage, but you don't really need that. There are plenty of people with a budget of zero who achieve their goal. However, you should know what you do have and evaluate if that's enough to get by. Analog horror has the benefit of more simplistic graphics, which is why new filmmakers seem to flock to it, but you should still know if the software, footage, and sounds available to you are sufficient enough to achieve your vision. I'd highly recommend making a bunch of test videos long before you ever finish the real thing. Getting the effects accurate is a bit of a common problem I see, since a lot of people don't know how to recreate the look they're going for outside of slapping a VHS screen over it. There's a lot more than just the VHS screen, and I'd highly recommend making a list of real media from the time frame of your series and mimicking that style. There are also a lot of things you may not be capable of doing on your own, such as drawing, acting, or composing, which may require you to find assistance. It's probably better to work with a group, but if your only option is doing it alone, just be prepared for how you'll need to adapt. As I stated, the appeal of this genre is often the simplicity that can be used to your benefit, though I should make it very clear that simplicity is an opportunity and not an excuse. If anything, you should be working harder on your craft because you've been given this advantage. Another question I'd want to ask is, how realistic is this and what are the rules? There can be quite a bit of variety in this genre. On the one hand, you have found footage that aims to be as convincing as possible, but on the other hand, you have the more cinematic content that is quite evidently just a story. There's no one side you need to pick, and you can have elements of both, but it's good to know what you're aiming for. If you're going for that blend of both qualities, I'd say the Walten Files is the best example. It has footage that seems plausible, but also a lot of more made up elements just for the storytelling. It also shows how you don't really need any impressive props or CGI to get the point across. So when I ask how realistic this is, there's the visuals and then there's the plot itself. Visually speaking, I want you to evaluate how true to the time these graphics look, or if you would watch this and actually think it was authentic. You should do a lot of research on the time period and setting to make sure it's accurate. Regarding the story, I want you to ask yourself if this is something you could imagine believing or being scared of. Of course, it's all made up, and depending on how bizarre the plot is, it may not be believable at all. But imagine you find this with no context. I want you to wonder how it would make you feel. You don't need to rationally believe what you're making, but you should feel it and see if anyone you show it to also feels that way. And another thing about the believability is that it doesn't need to make sense in our world, but it should make sense in the story's world. You should establish what the rules of your universe are and make sure what's happening in this world seems plausible or rational by its own standards. You would usually hint at these rules for the audience, but if they don't need to know, you should still know. One of my big pet peeves for this genre is how often there's someone possessing technology or being sacrificed into technology. Its purpose for the plot usually makes sense to me, but more often than not, I just don't understand why the spirits would do that or why the killer would do that. Like, it'll be some company that goes, "Oh man, our kids game or kids cartoon is not very good, so let's put some souls in it." Like, why? Kids don't really care that much about how realistic a show or a game is. It's just kind of a stretch that a company would need to start doing satanic rituals for views. I mean, unless you're making fun of rich people. And then I'm wondering how these human souls are ending up in every person's TV or copy of the product, and there's no explanation that rationalizes this decision. Although overused, I love this possessed technology and cursed kids media concept, but I want people to be a little more original and put some thought into it. Another question is, what do you want from the audience? When your viewers see this, what do you want them to take away from it? Should your viewer be uncomfortable, genuinely scared, disgusted, intrigued, or even upset from seeing this? I know fear is the main focus in this genre, but there are different thrilling or uneasy emotions you might want to go for, or even add feelings of anger or sadness. Are you creating a mystery that the viewer should piece together? Are you trying to make them jump? Do you want their skin to crawl? Or is there a tragedy or injustice that hurts to watch? Now, I would say that ongoing mysteries with original stories are my favorite and result in some of the best content, but you don't always need to go that route. You can make something that's just scary or uncomfortable, and that can be enough. However, that route can be very easy to mess up, and you generally don't want to go for the low-hanging fruit. Horror based entirely on jump scares is pretty cheap, and using shocking imagery or themes to elicit a reaction can go very poorly. If the whole point of your content is to be as shocking or offensive as possible, you are on very thin ice. These things aren't completely off the table, but you don't just throw them out there as a last resort to get a reaction. You should be pretty thoughtful with the use of these things. Best case scenario, you throw a bunch of violence and blood in there, and you look like an edgy middle schooler. Worst case scenario, you throw in references to SA or CP, and now you look like an insensitive asshole with a permanent stain on your record. These themes aren't impossible to use, but just be very careful and considerate about it. And do not use real photos or footage of people. This is already a general rule when you don't have consent, but don't go looking up real bodies or victims to use. If you really need gore or something, look up a medical textbook or a surgery video online, but don't put a real deceased, mutilated, or traumatized person in your video. Finally, I ask, how can you stand out? Now, this is definitely more difficult to answer. When everything's been done, what can you possibly do? Well, I think there's some solace in knowing nothing is original. It's just impossible. Everything came from something, no matter how new it seems, but you can always keep track of what's been done to death and what you haven't seen much of. I know kids' media turned scary as the biggest thing right now, and it'd be pretty difficult to introduce any new ideas. But then you'll have something completely different like the Monument Mythos, which had a completely different subject matter compared to the rest of this genre. Like, I've honestly never thought of how someone could make American monuments scary, and it was just very interesting to me. Outside of just internet horror, you've got artists like Junji Ito that can turn the mere shape of a spiral into the premise of a series. Really, anything can be horror if you want it to be. I mean, even SpongeBob made things that gave people nightmares. And don't get me started on a bad case of stripes again. The problem with making something new is that inspiration can't be forced out. It's something that just kind of comes to you. You can watch a lot of horror and list what's been done and what hasn't, but ultimately you should do what you like and what you want to see. These projects can take weeks, months, or years of your life, so you better enjoy what you're doing. Drawing from your own passions will not only make this more enjoyable, but that passion will shine through. Your care and your dedication will show itself. You should make what you want to see and what you would watch. If fame and fortune never come, and for many it won't, make what you'll be proud of.